Hello viewers and welcome to my new video. In today's video I'm gonna be reacting to one of the newest videos by Rick Beato, and this is the interview with Stewart Copeland, formerly of the Police. And some of these interviews that Rick Beato has been doing have been really interesting and have been opening up a lot of information, so from behind the scenes about bands, how they kind of formed, how they interacted with each other. And this makes me sort of really interested because I have very similar experiences actually from my own sort of time with being in bands and things like that. So I thought that I'd give this a go because I've actually seen it, I've watched this, but I thought that I would do a proper reaction video so I can actually share with you some of my observations and compare them to some of my own experiences.
I was just saying to you that the Police never broke up, according to Sting, but yet you have the perfect.
I'm so touched by that.
You made these 5 amazing records, and then, right at the height of your career, stopped playing. Who does that?
It was great that we never saw the other side of the parabola, the inevitable decline on the other end, which.
How interesting is that in itself, actually? That first opening statement that they never broke up, or perhaps they stopped at the height of their career. And you know what? Obviously, I couldn't compare myself to that sort of level of, fame and success as the Police. But actually, you know what? Sometimes it does happen when your band is actually sort of seemingly doing really well, or is at this like sort of its peak, that actually things might stop. And usually that is because of something else is happening in the background, and usually that is something that the other people just do not see, because all they see is this facade, the front of the band when the band goes on stage and so on. And actually, I've experienced similar things with my own bands as well.
It's very rare because there's usually one more record. And we were surrounded by everybody who thought we should make another record. Of course, there was nobody who didn't think it would be a great idea to make another record, except for, well, 2 guys. And looking back, I'm very...
How interesting is this also? Because again, similar story, when one of my bands sort of split up in the past, again, we got, actually 2 bands that did, we got a lot of messages, from people like, oh, no guys, you can't do that, you've been doing so well, there's so much more that you could do, and that kind of thing. But again, for us, for the band itself, that was kind of the end of the road, at least at that particular time.
Grateful that we actually got as many as 5 albums, because really it was over after the 3rd album. After Zenyatta Mondada, which was the first time the tension within the band started to appear, and then when we went to Montserrat for Ghost in the Machine, our 4th album, it was hell on earth. I never thought we'd get to another record because I could see, I didn't understand it, but I could see it. And it wasn't until decades later in band therapy that we figured out what the problem was.
Which was?
That we make music for different reasons. Music has a different function in our lives. We go about thinking about music in different ways. We make it by different means. It has, when we were young and codependent and we needed each other, we were inspired by our differences. And
you know what, I need to pause here because again, this sounds so familiar to my own experiences, because often, and I've talked about this in some of my other videos here on my channel, people form bands and they all think that they all want the same thing, but oftentimes you'll find that actually no, they don't. And this is why it's so important, and I talked about this, to find a common vision of a band so that every band member understands it, and you are all working towards the same goal and the same objective. Because if you do not communicate this with each other, then it might turn out that actually, everybody is actually thinking something completely different. You're not actually heading towards the same direction. You may be having this chemistry together as musicians, and you may be sort of working really well in terms of playing music, but as far as anything else goes, like involved in sort of running of the band, that actually may not be aligned.
And when Sting would pull out a song and we'd leap on it, and he'd say, "Oh gosh, you guys like my song? Cool. Okay, you want to change the fuck up the rhythm? Okay." But then after he'd written a string of hits, one after the other, and he'd learned, because he was the novice at first, and he'd been in every studio in the world. I'd had recorded a few albums, knew a thing or two.
Yeah.
Sting, it was his first band in a studio properly. So at first he was very appreciative of our appreciation, but then after a while he learned, he's a quick study, and by the time of the third album, he knew how to not only record an album, but how to arrange a pop song perfectly. And the next two albums, he's even getting better at it and more affirmed as a hit songwriter, and it became less and less easy for him to compromise, because he doesn't just write a melody and a lyric, he writes the whole damn thing with the drum part, everything in a perfect creation that he has in his mind.
This is really, really interesting, actually, what Stewart has said here, because, again, I have done this myself, actually, and even now, of course, now I'm working sort of on my own in my solo project, but even before, when I was in bands, because of the way I write music, I already have sometimes these full ideas. So I would hear the entire song, I could actually hear the drums, I would hear the bass in my head, and sometimes I would also put that all together, maybe even at home before presenting it to the rest of the band. There were other times also where we collaborated more. So for example, maybe I would bring a riff and someone might have another riff, and maybe we would combine these things together and kind of put the song together. And also, especially on lyrics side, I have often collaborated. So I maybe would write music and another person would write lyrics for the song. So that's really interesting in itself, but I can fully understand what he's actually describing here.
That's just no fun for the drummer.
Would he bring in demos eventually?
Oh, he
of the
would
whole
bring
thing?
in platinum demos.
Was-
when we heard the demo of Every Breath You Take,
Don't,
Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic.
Yeah.
It was a hit.
Yeah.
It was a hit already. But that's no fun for us. So the conflict was that he has it perfect in his mind, and any deviation from the perfectitude in his mind, which didn't involve any of my shit, was a real problem for him, and he struggled with it. And the struggle from my end was having somebody with such an implacable, play it like this, fuck off. You play your bass and sing your damn song. I got this. Turn the fuck around. That was my perspective, but for his perspective, the writer of those songs, it just became, why do these cretins not see the perfect vision that I have? What's the matter with you, Stewart? Do you not understand genius? And believe me, I do understand genius, but I also got something to say. So that's where the conflict was. I'm not a good session player. Even if I had been less egotistical and less accepting of the genius that he brought to us so generously, I don't play anything the same twice. I'm a terrible session player. I don't remember the arrangement. I don't remember what you want me to what? What was that this for? I don't know. I just bang shit. And it's just, with the best of intentions, difficult for us to work together.
How long do you work on the songs before you record?
This is also very interesting, because I actually have worked with people with sort of both approaches. Sometimes some people like to be more spontaneous and and they wouldn't play a song exactly the same always. And then I've also played with people who are more rigid. When it comes to me personally, I suppose I do like to write things and then sort of recreate those things when playing live as well. So that even comes down to solos. Whilst I've also done a lot of improvisation and actually jamming with my band members in a rehearsal room, but I think once the song is finished, unless I want to change something and actually present it in a way to the audience that I'm going to think, oh yeah, I'm going to add something extra, especially for you because this is a live show, then my way of thinking usually is that I want to give people live what they've heard on that record, so almost like they can hear me perform that thing, that I actually recorded. in a live situation. But there are other approaches, and for example, I've been collaborating a lot with Will Atkinson, that you will know from my other videos, the bass player, and he actually likes to improvise. He likes to, you know, play songs differently, and actually his sort of theory and viewpoint on this is, when I spoke to him about these things, is that he doesn't want the songs to sound like on the record when he plays live, and he likes to put sort of new things, and a lot of the times these things are improvised on the spot.
Whatever I came up with right then, I hardly
was it.
and I didn't know what the lyrics were about, because he's just mumbling. He's playing his bass for the thing and sort of just singing the song as a placeholder.
Yeah.
So I'm not even playing.
So he wouldn't even have the lyrics done.
Oh,
on
he
some
would
of
have the
songs.
lyrics done.
Okay, all
but
right.
he's not. He's focused because
He's focusing on the bass part.
I'm gonna expose a little trade secret of a little stingo here.
All right.
Which is that his bass lines are so tricky that he has to practice at home singing while playing those fucked up bass lines. That are contrary, you know, if you're going dun 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 dun, then you can sing. But if it's da 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 da, trying to sing, that's quite challenging.
Now, this is something I can so relate to, because being a guitarist who also sings, and even, you know, I also play bass and record bass for my own songs. I sometimes write this sort of more intricate rhythms and song chord progressions and then bass lines that actually, you know, because I always come up with the music, or usually come up with the music before I come up with the lyrics. So I would write this music and then I can play it, it's great, but when it actually comes to singing it on top of the playing, so to be able to perform it live, sometimes it can be a challenge. So I have also done this myself, when I had to actually sit down and actually learn it, actually being able to synchronize the two things, you know, to play the music on the instrument and to sing at the same time, which might be counterintuitive sometimes as well.
We'd record it right there, and whatever I came up with right there, spontaneously, is on the record forever and ever and ever. Whereas the other two guys got to spend the next 2 months honing, you know, Andy had his Les Paul, he had the 68 Les Paul and the 79 Les Paul and the 3 different Stratocasters and a Telecaster and some other guitar you never even heard of, and a full Fred Astaire of foot pedals. He could just, while Sting and I are in the pool lovingly going through all of his guitars, you know, and we'd come back and we'd take turns going into the control booth just to beat him up. And Sting would spend a month or weeks perfecting all of his vocals and everything. We mostly left him alone because he knew what the fuck he was doing. We'd be in there just to chivvy him up, but mainly he knew what he was doing. But it was usually one guy between them. I mean, the drums went down, we're all there, they're pretending to play, and I do the drums. But for the overdubs, there would be one guy in the pool, one guy in the control room, and one guy playing stuff.
So he did say to me, when I asked him, I said, Sting, going back to something you said earlier, I said, Sting, was it easy to play the bass parts and sing? And he said, no, I had to practice it a lot.
Yeah, because I discovered this when.
How interesting is that, by the way? Because I've actually experienced both, being sort of in the studio with the entire band when we were recording, and also sort of doing it sort of more individually, especially with the vocals when I was sort of there maybe recording by myself without the rest of the people from the band being present. But we've also done both things actually, so just an interesting thing to hear as well.
For the sound check, rack 1, doom, 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 forever. Okay, what are you fucking doing? You got one fader there, one tom-tom, you know, hello, doomed. Okay, rack 2, dum, 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 dum. It's just like the other one, you know. I don't do that anymore. I've paid my dues. I don't have to go doom, doom, doom anymore.
Right.
But the thing is that since this is an annoying exercise and has cleared the stage of all other musicians, it's done without other musicians. So by itself, those tom-toms sound monstrous. Doom, doom, boom. Okay, count the band in, you know, they don't cut through.
Right.
They have huge power, depth, majesty on their own, but they don't cut through. And so tune them up high, and without the PA, they go bing, bang, bong. But you put them through a 5 billion watt PA, and they go bang, boom. You know, they cut through.
So this is interesting in itself, and this is about the mix or even the live mix sound, which is really interesting. That what he's talking about here, that instruments on their own can sound great, but when it comes to sort of them sounding in the band context, they may not do, and they may not cut through with their frequencies. So he's actually very clever here, and has figured this out, that in order for these toms to be audible and cut through the mix so people can hear them very well, he needs to tune them higher.
Then, but by some miracle, the BBC decided to pick up Clark Kent and play this dumb song, "Don't Care." Then there was a secret identity. Nobody knew who Clark Kent was. People thought it might be Frank Zappa, David Bowie, Suzi Quatro, I don't know, and had a hit. In fact, Clark Kent went on BBC, Top of the Pops, national TV, and because he didn't want to appear as one solo guy, I think Clark Kent is very similar to me, actually, in many ways. Not a solo guy. I'm a band guy. I like to be in a band. I don't want to be one guy standing there. It's boring, So Clark Kent brought along some friends of mine, Andy and Sting and Kim Turner and Florian Pilkington, all in weird masks and gorilla masks, to play this song on Top of the Pops. And that was the first time any of the three blonde heads were on national TV, was as Clark Kent's backing band. It does bring joy to my life.
Now, this is quite interesting, and actually it just demonstrates that things sometimes happen sort of in the least expectant way.
Did you play with clicks ever?
No, ever. Oh, well, actually, no. Defining the click more broadly, some of the songs had a synthesizer pattern.
Okay.
Such as Synchronicity, whichever, I forget.
Synchronicity 1.
The one that goes diddle, diddle, diddle,
Yes.
diddle, diddle. Okay, now that's a pattern in a loop. So we played to that.
Okay, and what was
That's really interesting, because my experiences with playing to a click are varied. For instance, I've never really been somebody who's like sitting down and sort of playing with a click, but I've always had this good like rhythmic kind of understanding. So like playing with the band has always been my thing, with other musicians, with other instruments, but it's an interesting thing what he's saying here, because they used to record things, I believe, also in the past, where they weren't necessarily recorded to a click, and the drummer was often your click, unless you had synthesizers like he's saying here that were sort of keeping that rhythm sort of solid.
And by the way, son of a bitch he was playing with a plectrum in those days too. Then he switched over to using his fingers, because that's what the jazz cats do. And
was that during the
we had
Police that he did
conversations
that?
about this.
You didn't like the sound of it, right?
I preferred his plectrum.
Yeah.
And it's so uncool, and it's so like white trash to use a plectrum on bass.
Very punk rock though. Very well.
Yeah, a lot about, certain
McCartney.
songs, Bring on the Night. You cannot play that with your fingers, motherfucker. You wrote the song and I'm telling you. You can't, that's a plectrum against the, going up and down on the string. This just doesn't cut it.
I want to ask.
That's really interesting in itself as well, because I've had these things, sometimes I play the bass with my fingers and sometimes I will use a pick. But yes, there is definitely this stigma in the bass players community about, what should you be using, a pick or fingers, or sometimes even it appears to be almost somewhat shameful to be using your pick. It's like you're not the real bass player. But it's an interesting commentary here from Stewart Copeland, who is a drummer.
And finally, one morning, caffeinated, okay, motherfucker, just play me your demo. Just play me your demo, and I'll show you how playing like a click, which would amount to be playing with a click. Just run your demo down. You can stand here, tell me when the chorus is coming up. So we're both grumpy, and we've just been arguing. Okay, play like that, and he plays down this song. Every little thing she does is, and he's standing, and that was one take, right there, with him standing over me, saying, "Okay, chorus," and him kind of flagging the changes, and me in a over caffeinated grump. To demonstrate how this ain't gonna work, and it kind of did.
Now,
Really interesting story this, to be honest with you, because yeah, it just shows you how certain things are made and recorded, and in what atmosphere sometimes between those musicians in the band as well.
There's only three of us.
Yeah.
So none of us felt like we were being undermixed, or, you know, mixing was the easiest part. But before automation, right, it used to be a manual process where you've spent your time filling all the tracks with stuff. There's the mix where, okay, the bass is this loud, it gets the drums are that loud, and we get everything sort of sounding right like that. But then when it comes to the guitar solo, the guitar needs to go up a little bit.
Right.
And in the chorus, the drums are a little bit loud. Okay, we go back there, the drums need to come back a little bit for the verse. Or the first part of the thing, we're establishing the riff drum, but then, you know, there's changes.
So who would do that? Would you actually be involved?
Well, the
in
band
that?
does that.
Okay.
There's four of us.
You're standing at the
there's
console.
the engineer.
Yeah.
And three guys in the band.
Yeah.
And I get the guitar faders. Andy gets the drum faders, and somebody else gets the so nobody gets their own faders.
Okay.
You know, for that drum fill. Yeah. No, let's have the guitarist do the drum faders, and
That's
have the
pretty smart,
drummer
actually.
do the guitar faders. You know, for the solo. Yes, I can hear it, Andy. Andy, you can hear it. For some reason, you know, I don't recall any big battles over the mix.
That is so interesting because, you know, and such a great idea in itself, because there is that tendency, or there can be that tendency actually, to turn yourself up in the mix so that, oh yeah, everything's like my instrument or my voice is really, really up front. But actually, for the entire song to work really well, I think this is an incredible idea actually for each member of the band to be sort of moving the faders of the other instrument. Really, really cool.
There's one recorded argument, which was in the documentary that went with our reunion tour, where we're laughing. It's a joke. We're having fun. You know, those two would always gang up on me, and they'd have to, because there's only fucking two of them, and they're little guys. You know, what are they gonna? They need two of them to gang up on me. And our repartee is always the same sort of thing, that I just bang shit and they're actual musicians, and they condescend to turn around to me and say, F sharp minor, Stewart, I know that you don't know what I'm talking about, but, you know, and...
That's really actually interesting as well, showing those band dynamics behind the scenes as well. There is a lot more in that interview. I'm not going to be going through all of the full hour of it. But, you know, I've made my commentary about the bits that I found the most sort of intriguing and interesting, especially from the band sort of interaction and communication perspective. There's a lot more in there about sort of recording techniques, mixing techniques, how things were done, etc., etc. Also about the sound, things like that. So if you want to find that out, I would encourage you all to watch the entire video, because it's really, really interesting. And for me, this is at the end of my video today, and thanks for watching, thanks for being here. Leave me a comment, give me a like, and I'll see you in my next video.